candidate will be permitted 1 minute opening statement. We selected that out in the hall this morning by sheer chance of a coin toss. And Mr. Wrights won that toss, so he'll be starting the debate this morning with his opening statement. Prior to asking each question, the moderators will announce the order in which the candidates will respond. I think we just already took care of that. And the moderators will alternate asking questions between you gentlemen. The audience members are allowed to submit questions. Take a look at the screens, the instructions on how to submit questions. It is the moderator's discretion whether or not they want to use the audience questions. You gentlemen will have 60 seconds to answer those questions. When I hold up the blue card, that's your 15-second warning. Red card, hard stop. And if I had the power button to doop, I'd stop it. But I don't, so please respect the red card. It will be up to the discretion of the moderators for a rebuttal. You will have 30 seconds on the rebuttal if so permitted. And at the end of the debate, each one of you will be given 2 minutes closing statements. Any questions, John? Okay. Now let's get on with the show. Our moderators today are two gentlemen from the local area that are in the media industry. I had the great pleasure of meeting both of them last year for my bid for Columbus City Council, and they treated me with the utmost respect and took my campaign very serious, which I was truly grateful for, because it's hard enough running as a Libertarian, and especially being a first-time candidate, and these guys treated me as if I had been running for 20 years. So thank you, gentlemen. If you would stand up when I call your name and give a wave to the crowd. Mr. Doug Caruso, City Hall reporter from the Columbus Dispatch. And Mr. Chuck Douglas, host of the Chuck Douglas Radio Show. Our candidates immediately to the right of me is Mr. Wrights and Governor Gary Johnson. Mr. Wrights, if you would like to go ahead and start with your opening statement, sir.
Thank you. There we go. I'd like to thank Ohio LP for having us here today. We got to do something about these early debates. I don't know. You know, we travel a lot. We like to sleep a little later than this, but that's okay. I want to thank you for coming and being with us this morning at an early time slot like this. You know how important it is for you to do the work of the party, and this takes time away from that, but we are on a job interview. That's what we do. We don't really debate when we go to these debates. I don't know that we disagree enough to really debate hard, but we want to offer you true choices with rational alternatives, because Governor and I have talked about this before. We both agree. The Libertarian Party can make a difference in 2012. The way we do that is we be different. And that's fairly easy for most of us, because we're Libertarians, we're different already. But whether you're a Libertarian or not, you're different in this country because you don't like the status quo. You don't believe in what the Democrats and Republicans are doing with our government. You don't believe in what they're doing to other governments. That makes you different, whether you're a Libertarian or not. And this country desperately needs the difference that Libertarians can bring. So just let me say welcome. Thank you for having me. And let's have some fun.
Bad news. I think this country... bad news. I think this country is in really deep trouble. I think we're going to suffer a monetary collapse unless we get our spending in line. The good news is that we can fix this. So I'm making 3 promises as President of the United States. One is, I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I promise to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue, and I suggest to you that with those 2 promises, spending will be less than any other scenario that you could possibly come up with. I'm also promising to advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system, income tax, corporate tax, tax withholdings, and replace it with the fair tax. The Libertarian candidate for president is going to be the only candidate that's going to be talking about gun rights and gay rights in the same sentence. The Libertarian candidate for president is the only candidate that's going to be talking about slashing welfare spending and slashing warfare spending in the same sentence. I think Libertarians do have the answer, and
all right, I guess I'll ask the first question. I've never met a libertarian who didn't say they want less government. But let's take this back and say that you had a blank slate, everything's clear, there is no government, it's up to you what you do have and how you're going to pay for it. What would you add? I guess let's take the first question to Governor Johnson.
well, the notion of what fundamentally government should be about. And government fundamentally should be about protecting you and I against individuals, groups, countries that might do us harm. So in that context, law enforcement, the courts, prisons, military. And in that context also, I think it's important to have a libertarian candidate for president that can articulate perhaps government not being involved in those areas also. I mean, the ultimate goal here is less government, no government, and it's a worthy goal. But back to protection. Look, what I do in the confines of my own home, doing no harm to anyone arguably other than myself, government should not be involved in that.
Mr. Wright?
Well, this is one of those questions that articulates just what I was saying. We're not really going to debate this question because Governor Johnson's right. Governments are established to protect our rights. Now, theoretically, protect our persons as well, but we've all seen how poorly they do that. So that's why I favor the Second Amendment and protect ourselves. The governments are instituted to protect our rights, individual rights. Very little else should they be doing. Now, protection means the things that the governor articulated. Certainly we need to have a national defense. We need to have a court system. I would not advocate any kind of federal police force. Got too many of those already we need to get rid of. But basically just to protect us, to start there. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the Constitution. I'd like a government that we can fit inside the Constitution.
Gentlemen, when we talk about the Libertarian Party, the stance of the Libertarian Party, and unfortunately the message of the party does not reach the majority of the voters. People still scratch their head when you say, what is a libertarian about? Trying to put the libertarian philosophy and your personal philosophy as a candidate together with the current day versus what we know from history. Libertarian defining a lack of over-government control. We go back to the 70s when the airlines were controlled, and airline fares were lower, and more people were flying, and we had 747s that were 2 tiers with a bar and a piano player. We go to the 80s when the oil industry was regulated, and we have 75 cents per gallon gas. Today, with all of the lack of regulation, we're paying $4 a gallon. Airlines are expensive and not getting nearly the traffic that they had. Is there some middle ground within your philosophy and within the libertarian philosophy overall that might allow for a return of some types of regulation that we have sacrificed in the name of freedoms that might actually spur economic growth and development? Governor, we can start with you.
Was there, Chuck, no offense intended, but a 2-minute question for, I'm just kidding. I
I like to ask good ones.
Well, so I would disagree with your premise. I think that airlines today are a lot less expensive than they were decades ago when they were controlled. So deregulation of the airline industry, I think, has resulted in more routes and much cheaper fares. With regard to gasoline, with regard to oil, I would like to point out that perhaps when you think about the cost of gasoline being, let's say, 25 cents in 1964, that it's still 25 cents today if you have the quarter from 1964. So we have the devaluation of our dollar, and that real solutions do lie in free markets, that there is a magic to free markets, and I would argue that regulation has gotten worse in all these areas as opposed to better, and that would be responsible really for rising costs when it comes to energy.
Well, the true problem here, of course, is more than just regulation, and the governor makes a good observation that these industries are still regulated. They may not be as heavily regulated as one time, but they're still regulated. There's costs that are always involved with that regulation. And as far as gas goes, I mean, you're talking 3 taxes on top of the price of gas every time you buy a gallon anyway in a lot of places, with the federal tax, the state tax, and the local taxes that are placed on it. So you're looking at a problem where you've got regulation and taxation working together to remove wealth from the citizens, which is the economy. So the economy suffers. And he's right about the devaluation of money. I mean, things are not really costing us more. They seem more because the money's worth less. What we need to do is prop our money system back up, get it backed by something real, and stop printing money that's not worth the paper it's printed on.
I'm seeing several questions from the audience here with a similar theme, so I'm going to try to kind of put these together. But when you have a party that, on the one hand, advocates for the legalization of drugs, and for gun rights at the same time, and you have an American public, and this is as an example, that where there are many people who may support drug legalization, but they also support gun control, or they may support Second Amendment rights, but those same people would really like to lock up drug dealers. How do you go out to a public and gain traction with an American public that may only agree with you half the time? Mr. Wrights, I'll let you start this one.
Well, I'm not sure that they only agree with us half the time anymore. The more I go places, the more I talk to people, the more I find that there's a lot more people that agree with us than did before. Now, there are rooms for disagreement in all groups and in all society. Certainly, they're not going to disagree with everything that we talk about. And you make a good analogy between the drug war and gun laws. What we need to do is be better teachers, be better informers, so that people understand guns and drugs are bad not because of the guns and drugs. Guns don't kill anybody. It's an inanimate object. It lays right there until some human being manipulates it. And people are killing each other not over drugs, not over the drugs themselves, but over the money generated by the drugs because we have a prohibition on the drugs. They've taken a couple of relatively inexpensive plants and turned them into extravagant profits. Of course, there's going to be warfare over that much money. We just need to be better about delivering our message and letting people know what's working. What we're doing now is not working.
Speaking with a broad brushstroke, I think the majority of Americans describe themselves as classical liberals. The notion of less government, and that the notion of government getting involved in personal decisions should not be the case. So, speaking with a broad brushstroke, the fact that the majority of Americans are fiscally conservative and socially tolerant, which encompasses the Libertarian Party. You know, if there has been a criticism of the Libertarian Party over the last 40 years, it's kind of been that the Libertarian Party is, if you will, kooky or out on the fringe. But as of 4 months ago, a Gallup poll, 50% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. Ultimately, who's responsible for moving it to 50% of America? It's the Libertarian Party. So I think the opportunity here exists to present the Libertarian Party as the party that really represents the majority of Americans.
Hear, hear.
Let's follow up on that. The Libertarian Party representing the majority of Americans. As a party, there is a platform. Within every family, there is disagreement. What is the one element of the Libertarian platform that either of you can say, this is something I have to disagree with? Mr. Wrights, can we start with you? We started with Kevin last time.
Actually, it was the other way around, but that's all right. Chuck, I don't know why we're crossways twice
Let's review this.
Doug's turn.
Nothing immediately leaps to my mind as to what I disagree with as far as the Libertarian platform. But we can only take that Libertarian platform so far. The two of us are running for President of the United States. And if I'll entertain this fantasy for a moment. All y'all went out and told all your friends, and they told all their friends, and I'm president. I swear to uphold one thing, the Constitution of the United States. That will be my platform. Nothing else. Platform is a guiding light for us, so to speak. It enunciates our principles and articulates them. Does a fairly good job. But the job I'm seeking is to defend, protect, and uphold the Constitution of the United States, and that's what I intend to do. I will not enforce a single federal statute that does not follow the Constitution.
10 weeks ago, I went to the Florida Libertarian Convention, and I went and I manned the Libertarian booth at the state fair. I bought myself a Libertarian t-shirt to stand at that booth. I will make a confession here that I have never worn a Republican t-shirt in my life. And the reason is that there is certain Republican dogma that I just can't defend and don't want to be put in a position to defend because I never have. There is nothing about being a libertarian that I can't defend and won't defend. And it does have a basis in the Constitution.
Just one point of clarification. I've never worn a Republican t-shirt either.
Governor Johnson, earlier you talked about, but actually both of you talked about, that the basis of the government's protection, military, courts, that kind of thing. Right now our military is probably a third of military personnel are stationed overseas. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year to have people stationed in foreign countries. If you were to become president, how much of that would continue? How much of that is necessary? And how much of that would have to go by the wayside?
My first promise as President of the United States, submitting a balanced budget to Congress. That would include a 43%, that would entail a 43% reduction in military spending. What's a 43% reduction in military spending? That's nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. That's reducing the military footprint on the planet. That's us being in foreign countries. That's the conflicts that we're currently involved in, extricating ourselves from those conflicts. That's research and development. That's intelligence. That's the military that are in uniform, and that's the civilian support staff that goes along with that. Believing that the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we are bankrupt. And if we don't balance the budget, we're going to find ourselves with nothing.
Well, the governor's right again. One of our biggest threats to our national security is the debt crisis that we face. The military is a big part of that. Those of you who have been following my campaign That is my platform, to stop all war. If I'm elected president, the first thing I'm going to do is declare peace. And declare peace with ourselves and with America and with the rest of the world. I'm going to tell people we're not going to be killing you anymore. At the same time, we're not going to tolerate being killed by you either. I'm not a pacifist. I'm a veteran. I believe in self-defense. I believe in the country defending itself. I'm not a pacifist. I just don't believe I have to kill somebody to prove it. None of us do.
Gentlemen, there are estimates of 300,000 non-documented people in the United States of America. ICE says they have the capacity to hold and detain 34,000. But we are hearing now that there will be cuts through Homeland Security to the ICE budget, where some of those 34,000 will now have to be released into society without the ability really to track them. We're spending $166 per day per prisoner to house these people. What is your solution to the immigration situation in this country? And Governor, I'll start with you.
Well, number one, first of all, when you talk about detainment of individuals that would be doing crime in the United States, that is always going to be something that we should spend money on. But what we shouldn't be spending money on is building a fence, number one. And then number two, I think we should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but a work visa. Would immigrants stand in line if the line were moving to get a work visa? Yes, they would. So work visa would entail a background check, because we don't want criminals in this country, and would also involve a Social Security card so that applicable taxes would get paid. If we implement the fair tax, taxes would not be an issue at all. Whether you're an illegal immigrant, legal immigrant, visitor, U.S. citizen, paying a consumption tax is unavoidable.
Well, you're right. We don't want any criminals in this country. We need to start sweeping them out. We can start with Congress. The immigration problem, the situation, is a good example for libertarians. We should be using it to our advantage. The government has taken on a task that they cannot do, much like the war on drugs. I saw a Stossel report on this just several months ago. If you want to immigrate to this country, and you're from India, you have a PhD, it'll take you about 5 or 7 years to go through the process and become a citizen. A reasonable amount of time for most folks. If you're a migrant worker from south of the border, the same process takes you 131 years. Now, if you make a law that's impossible to follow, nobody's going to follow it, and we have literally made it easier to swim the Rio Grande than to climb Mount Bureaucracy. We need to reform the immigration system in this country and make it easier for people to come here and work.
A question from the audience here about net neutrality. And the question, as I understand it, is whether or not the corporations that now handle internet traffic are capable of creating a truly free market online without government regulation. And I'll read this exactly as it's stated in case I'm misunderstanding. Can you explain your stance on net neutrality? Do you truly feel a free market will allow for freedom of access to information? If so, how? Start with Mr. Wrights.
Free market, government, they don't go together. It's two different puzzles and all the pieces are mixed up. Free market is leaving the market alone. I agree with Governor Johnson. I've heard him say it many times. There's nothing about the internet I want the government to fix. I got on there this morning. Got on my Facebook page, told all my friends how things are going. Had no trouble at all. Wrote emails to my friends, no trouble at all. There's nothing the government can do to help the internet except stay out of the way. The free market will thrive there. Unfortunately, the only free market we have in this country right now is the black market. And it's a dangerous, expensive market to deal in. So, once again, I can't think of anything that the government needs to be doing with the internet. Just stay out of the way.
There is nothing that I want to see the government fix when it comes to the internet. And I have to tell you about my experience as governor of New Mexico. I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico, and I got to tell you, about a third of those bills had to do with corporatism. The notion that corporations that were doing business in New Mexico were looking to further their monopolies at a cost to citizens. So, open mind. I mean, understanding that there may be, in fact, atrocities that are happening. But I never found that to be the case. I found the case to be that in the case of, and this was the way that I came at this kind of legislation, so net neutrality, the notion that we should have more competition on the internet, when the reality is that when you look at the legislation, it's actually empowering or furthering the monopolies that the big companies already have, as opposed to creating competition. So I believe that it's the latter, that this would actually restrict internet and the growth of the internet.
Gentlemen, let's go to that fantasy world you alluded to earlier, where everyone spread the word and one
Well,
of
I don't stay there very often. I go there and I come right back.
one of you is elected president of this country, essentially an outsider to the political process, not a Democrat, not a Republican. How do you look a potential constituent in the face and explain to them how you as an individual, with 435 people that must be convinced that you are correct, how do you convince that constituent that you as an individual can make a difference in Washington, D.C.?
Well, what I've been doing is promising people exactly what I just said a couple of questions ago. The president has, specific powers in the Constitution. One of those is that he gets to interpret the Constitution. He gets to decide whether a law is constitutional or not. And if he says it's not, then it goes to the Supreme Court. Now, I can't imagine there'd be any busier government agency if I was president than the Supreme Court. They would be swamped with all the appeals and whatnot because this guy just won't enforce this law and we want him to do it. Well, show me in the Constitution where it says I can do it and I'll do it. If you don't, can't help you. Sorry. Persuading Congress to do anything is going to be near about impossible for anyone, whether they're in the loop or not. We got guys in the loop now that can't convince Congress to do anything. Congress is just a big committee, and Fred Allen said a committee is a group of individuals that by themselves can do nothing. Together they can decide nothing can be done.
I've run for 2 political offices in my life, this being the 3rd, but governor of New Mexico, re-election as governor of New Mexico. I've never been involved in politics prior to running for governor of New Mexico, and I vetoed 750 bills. I was an equal opportunity vetoer. A third of the legislature was Republican, a third of the bills I vetoed were Republican. Unofficially, I vetoed 100 bills where the vote in the legislature was 114-0, and I vetoed that bill. The veto was sustained. Only 2 of my vetoes were overridden. So I am not wanting to get elected to go to Congress and get along with Congress. Somebody needs to say no to what's going on. And I will tell you from my experience as governor of New Mexico, that is very powerful. It has a huge impact to be able to control all, without any legislation at all, to be able to control all the agencies, all the boards and commissions, to control, in essence, all rules and regulations. You can create certainty in government, and that's what this government, that's what this country needs right now, a level playing field.
Governor Johnson, you talked about balanced budgets immediately, one of your key promises. Can you also talk about what you would do about the national debt? We have to go beyond balanced budgets in order to take care of that debt.
Well, of course, we need to look ahead at the debt. But the reality is we have never slashed spending. Never. And that has to be the focus. You've got to start with a balanced budget. And right now, when it comes to Republicans and Democrats, I mean, the difference between the two is instead of a $10 trillion increase in our national debt over the next 10 years, Republicans are saying that that's going to only be $8 trillion as opposed to $10 trillion. The national debt or the deficit needs to be ended now. Back to my promise to submit a balanced budget. And of course, I'm not promising a balanced budget because that entails Congress going along with that. But if you promise to submit a balanced budget, if you promise to veto expenses that exceed revenue, I suggest to you that in that scenario, spending will be less than any other possible scenario you can come up with, and you've got to start with balancing the budget first, something that has never happened before.
I hate it when he gets to go first. I'm jotting down my notes on what I want to say, and it's coming out of his mouth. That's exactly right. We've got to stop spending. Find yourself in a hole and you're already too deep. What's the first thing you do? Stop digging. That's right. We cannot spend our way out of debt. We can't print enough money to get ourselves out of debt. Every dollar we print right now is 43 cents of debt. Congress has not passed a budget in over 1,000 days. I don't believe they passed a budget the whole time Obama's been in office. So, of course, I would agree with submitting a balanced budget, but they're not passing budgets now. They're not following the Constitution now. We need Congress, we need bureaucrats, we need politicians to lose their jobs so that Americans can get back to work, stop spending all this money. It's the only way to get out of debt.
All right, gentlemen, Mr. Bridges has whispered in my ear that we have time for one final question, so I am going to paraphrase one that we received from the audience here and hit you with perhaps one of the most divisive words in the United States of America when it comes to political conversation.
Oh, goody.
Ah, yes. The word Israel. Interpret as you want. Governor, would you like to go first?
Well, I completely oppose foreign aid. The notion of printing and borrowing 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending and then turning around and giving it away to a foreign country, I'm opposed to that. But I think it's important to distinguish between military alliances and foreign aid. And military alliances, I think, being the key to us being able to reduce our military expenditures by 43% and still maintain a vigil against what may be military threat worldwide. Now, I think that threats need to start out with a basis of military threat, and I don't see that anywhere. If you take Iran, for example, what is Iran but an unintended consequence of what we did in Iraq? We take out Saddam Hussein, we take out Iraq, now Iran rears its head. If I were President of the United States, I would not want Israel to attack Iran. I do not believe they pose a military threat. We should be vigilant to that military threat. But if we bomb Iraq, we're going to be into a 2-year maintenance program of bombing Iran. So when it comes to Israel, an important military ally will remain an important military ally.
Well, you say Israel, and it gets in my ear and it becomes Middle East. And the reason for that is because I think about all the meddling we've been doing in the Middle East since the late 40s. What we've been trying to do in the Middle East is we've been trying to bribe people that have been at war with each other for centuries to be at peace. But what have we used for the bribery? Munitions and subsidies. And what has actually happened is we have become part of the process. We have given them an incentive to continue the warfare because nobody wants the guns and money to stop. I mean, it's madness. We should be friends and allies with everyone that we possibly can. turn to conversation and trade rather than bombs and guns for a foreign policy. Our foreign policy should be a good neighbor foreign policy, not a nosy neighbor foreign policy that we're involved in now. What's worse? Somebody moves in next door to you and starts getting in your business every day. I'll tell you what's worse is if that person lived on the next street over or in the next town, or God forbid on the other side of the world, that's still in your business every day. That's what makes people want to go to war. Be a good neighbor, not a nosy neighbor.
I guess we're going to go to closing statements. Each of you will have 2 minutes. Not sure who started on who opened.
I did.
Okay, and Governor Johnson, we'll let you.
This is a job interview, and I really do want the job, and so I apologize for just shamelessly here trying to pitch myself, but that is what this is all about.
Well, I'm not going to pitch for you.
So I think you've got to, I think the Libertarian Party needs to nominate someone, and not that either of us won't be doing this, but somebody who's going to identify the problems, identify the solutions that go along with those problems, and then have a resume to actually suggest that you're going to go out and doggedly pursue that agenda. So I think the fact that I've been an entrepreneur, I think the fact that I've grown a business from a one-person operation, me, to over 1,000 people, I think that speaks volumes. I said that I was an athlete. I'm an athlete. I remain a competitive athlete. 59, that's kind of an oxymoron, I've got to tell you. I've summited Mount Everest. I think you want somebody that can hunker down and do what it takes. And I broke my leg prior to going to Mount Everest, and all that just simply says is that everything we do in life comes with obstacles. And just figure on the obstacles. And you can either give up, or you can count on those obstacles getting in your way and making the most of that and moving forward. I mean, I think that's what that says. So there are two components here that go along with being President of the United States, in my opinion. The two components are civil liberties on one side, protecting civil liberties, that is what this country is all about, and doing that in the context of a balanced checkbook. I want to argue that fiscally, I was the most conservative governor in the country, and I based that on my vetoes. I want to say that from a civil liberties standpoint, with the report from the ACLU giving me the highest grade that they could give, that I have these credentials. And the pie in the sky here is, and I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I could win the presidency, the pie in the sky here is being on the national debate stage with Obama and what I think will be Romney, and presenting the libertarian case. Thank you.
Well, it is a job interview, and I want the job too. Not that the governor wouldn't be a fine president. I believe he'd be all right. I think I'd be all right too. We can make a difference. I said something about it in our opening statements. We do have to be different to do it. There's nothing wrong with the libertarian message. Nothing about it that needs to be massaged or worked on. It doesn't need to be softened or sharpened. We need to be sharper. We need to be softer. We need to be more tolerant of the people we're trying to reach. We need to seek tolerance from them. We need to show them that, yeah, we want to make a difference, but there are a lot of ways where we're not different at all. Look around. Families, friends, jobs, businesses. Americans. We are Americans. That's a great commonality that we have with the rest of the country. We've got good ideas. We've got true choices. We've got rational alternatives to the problems that we face today. We got to have a war on everything. I talk about it all the time. What we found from these different wars, war on poverty, war on ignorance, war on drugs. Still got poor people, still got ignorant people. People killing each other over drugs. War doesn't work. And one thing we need to learn here in the Libertarian Party is we can't even begin to do anything about the wars outside of a convention hall. until we stop the wars inside its walls, until we stop the wars right in here. That's why my personal motto throughout this whole campaign is, I am not at war. And if enough of us say it, they can't have them anymore. Because you can't have wars without support of the people. Thank you for having us today. I want to thank the governor for being with me, and be proud of yourselves. This is a fine group. I was listening to the videos. Nobody has to tell Libertarian Ohioans, Ohio Libertarians, what it means to be a Libertarian. They already know. Let's win this election this year. Let's get 1 million votes for the first time. Go to the website, Wrights2012.com, check out our videos, our projects. Join us, help us. Let's make a difference in 2012.
Big round of applause for the show. If I could have, Kristen, we're going to set up our straw poll as an interactive poll. The poll's going to be open for 10 minutes. Text in who you want to be POTUS. Thank you. The instructions are coming up. Give me a minute, Rob.